Welcome to Keep Hustling, where we are going past the why to get to the how. I'm your host, the always hustling Aaron Gordon, aka NY Risk Advisor, aka Mr. Keep Hustling. In this podcast, we will be diving deep into the professional and personal successes of our guests to find out how they hustled through the most difficult times in their life and their development to achieve the success they've gotten to today. So buckle up for what hopes to be an amazing ride. Let's get to it. Welcome to Keep Hustling with my guest, Jevon Gondwe. Jevon, thank you so much for being here today.
Absolutely. Been looking forward to this for quite some time. So thanks for having me on, Aaron.
I feel like I've accomplished something just by correctly and respectfully pronouncing your name. So I feel like we've done something here. Also, I believe, and I'm just going to jump right into this.
Yeah.
And I've said this in most episodes, read the bio, people. I'm not going to go through the whole bio because we're going to talk about some of the parts of it, but read the bio. It's important. And I think super awesome and super related to the hustle. Jevon is a 3-time NCAA national champion in the sport of soccer, I believe. Is that correct?
Yep. Going back a couple of years, but yeah.
That's okay. You don't look it. But for those watching, I want to start there because not only is it the first line in your bio, but getting to such a level and staying at such a level. I view NCAA athletics as close to pro as you can in any. I think it's like personally, I think it's like the minor leagues in many sports anyway. So it is basically, and it's especially as it relates to the time that you have to put into it to get to that stage.
Yep.
I mean, how many NCAA soccer players are there? Not hundreds of thousands in a given year. So what led you to want to get to that? And equally as important, or maybe even more important for this podcast, what was the most important thing in your focus that kept you zeroed in on that? And then when you got there, staying there?
Yeah. Wow. There's a lot to unpack with that. And I appreciate the question. Yeah. And I would agree with you too. High level, college athletics, regardless of the division, it takes a certain level of commitment, right? And a certain level of focus. And I have that as the foundation of my background because it really informs what I do today in terms of leadership development, helping maximize individual and team performance, at a high level. And so if you go back to what kept me going, one of the things that I talk about for my clients is like, you got to know your why, right? It's got to be crystal clear. Otherwise, we're going to be all over the place. That hustle loses its focus, the nature of today's audience. And so for me with athletics and soccer, I would probably boil it down to two things. One, I had a genuine love for competing and playing the sport. And that drove me to want to be better. It was an environment that I could perform in and grow and improve. And a big part of that too was I had someone else that really believed in me going back to the high school era, prior to even going into college sports. I was a good player. I was probably, if you look back at it, one of the best players that in my high school era during that time, people I played with and against, but I didn't know that about myself. That might sound odd.
Keep going. I'm going to poke you on that, but keep going.
Yeah. Cause, and so I had my father, I had, other mentors, coaches in my life that started pointing me in the direction to play at a very high level. And so that kind of drove me. I had someone that believed in me. So I worked for it, right? I worked hard for it. And then when I got into the program that I got into, if you look at it, I won't go through all of it in this moment because I'm sure you're going to want to add some comments here, but I played for two of the winningest coaches of all time in NCAA soccer. And it went from one coach in Dave Brandt, won 6 national championships in the 12 years that he was there. And then Brad McCarty, who's the current coach there now, took over the program as he was the assistant coach and then won 5 national championships, right? So you're talking about a dynasty over the course of, 20 years or whatever that is. And so for me personally, what allowed me to continue to thrive in that environment was a commitment to everybody else. Because if it was just me by myself on an island, I never would have performed at that level. I'll give you a very specific example. Our incoming into the preseason, right? A lot of teams have their trials, their tests, their fitness tests. Well, ours was the 5-minute mile. So yeah, I see your for those that don't know, 5-minute mile, if you're a track athlete, right. Sure, right? If you run the mile.
You didn't say 7, 8, or 10. You said 5.
Yeah,
right?
5. Sub 5. And coming into college, I had never even thought about running that fast. It wasn't even in my scope of expectation. And so we had a workout plan, a training plan, and I had only met the players once or twice, right? As I'm coming into that program. And all summer long, all I can think about is I've got to make it. I've got to make it. Well, coming into preseason, I had not run a 5-minute mile by myself. And this is a really important foundational lesson. Like, I had not run a 5-minute mile by myself. In fact, at that time, at 18 years old, the fastest I ran by myself was 5:27. Now, I'm sitting in the locker room. It's August. We're getting ready to run the mile. I am just like, I'm sweating. I'm nervous. I'm pretending I'm confident, but I'm not. I've totally got imposter syndrome. And I remember Dave Brandt to this day, he says, listen, if you don't finish the 5-minute mile, like, okay, I want you to get a 5-minute mile. But if you don't, you need to finish strong no matter what. Like, that was one of the values. Like, you need to finish the last lap has to be your fastest lap. And so now I'm a little bit mixed. Like, okay, I've only ever run 5:27. If I pace for a 5-minute mile, I'm not going to make it, right? In my mind, mentally. But I'm like, I also want to finish strong, and I do want to hit a 5-minute mile. So anyway, end of the story is, I was like, you know what, go big or go home. And so with the team around me pushing me to want to be better, I ended up finishing sub-5 and finished sub-5 all 4 years. Ended up, being a leader within that space by the end of the time there. And I think there's a lot of lessons in there that you want to touch on and unpack. But for me, a huge part of it was there was a bigger vision, that I was a part of something bigger than myself. And that drove me and motivated me. And it also was, there was a high standard, of performance to play at. And ultimately, I was passionate about it, right? It was something I really cared about. And that allowed me to not only get into that environment, that culture, but then stay in that culture and then grow in it over the course of time.
Well, first of all, I love that there's really two parts there, and I want to unpack both of them.
Sure.
Because I think there's lessons in both. The first is, I think that one of the most important things, we talk about this in business as it relates to mentorship, but I think that maybe even more important for the sake of the beginning of this conversation is the fact that in childhood, and when a person is trying to form, it is easier to chase your passions when someone believes in you. It's even easier than that part when the person has been there, or when the person has a reason to believe. For instance, when you have a coach who says, it's not some random spectator who says, well, I think you're really a great soccer player. Like, yeah, well, you look good. I saw that move you made. It was great. That the way that you, but when there's somebody who has been there before, it allows us to achieve things that we normally wouldn't have. And I think that also pairs perfectly with the second part about teammates, because it's not just the fear or the unwillingness or the not wanting to be the guy on the team that fails, but it's if we're together, we can't fail.
Yep.
And if you put both of those things together, it's if people put themselves, in my view, and I would love to hear, you did this at a much higher level than I did, but when you put those together, it's if there is somebody who has done it before, or who's by your side, who's leading you, or who's going with you in the same direction, with the same goals and with the same desires, you can actually achieve things that are impossible for other people.
Yep. 100%.
And by the way, it's interesting to say, what I would say is, the next day when you didn't have to, and if the team was still sleeping and you got up early and you tried to run the mile, who says you would have been sub-5? I don't think you would have been 10.
Yeah.
But you might have been the 5:27, 5:15.
Yep.
And it's that last push, that last drive, because somebody believes in you, either the person who has done it before and sees that in you and pushes that, or the person who's beside you says, if my success is tied to your success is tied to my success, let's do something special. And I think that if people get involved in things like that with teams, and it doesn't have to be sports, by the way, I think that when you watch, I was recently just talking to someone about this, you watch the way the construction sites come together, like a real expert tradesman. It's an art, and it's teamwork, and it's getting those rafters in line, and if one person slips or one person's off, the whole team falls apart and becomes less efficient. It's the same thing as sports. I just think we look at sports in that way.
Yeah.
But the ability for someone to have, for you to have someone who believed in you, right? Like, again, were you thinking that you were a good soccer player? Probably. But you said it yourself. NCAA championship level soccer was not in the forefront of your mind until someone pushed you and believed in you at that moment.
Yeah. I value all the things that you're sharing as well. One of the things that I found when it comes to, like, who should you trust on these things, right? Because there's a reason why, kind of to your point, that when our mom tells us that we're awesome, we don't always believe her. And it's not because we don't believe in our mom. It's just that our mom usually isn't an expert in the thing that she's saying we're good at, right? So it kind of, and it could be dad too, right? In fact, it's actually dad more often than not, pumping up their kid. In my case, my father played college soccer. He is a professor. Like, he just kind of had that perspective. Whereas my mom didn't play soccer. It wasn't her world. So my mom's words didn't have the same kind of weight, right? And so one of the things that I always recommend for people when they are looking for someone to listen to, learn from, there's kind of a couple areas, kind of what you're getting at here is, one, do they have credibility in the area that you're trying to pursue, right? Like, are they actually good at the thing that you're trying to work on, whether that's business, entrepreneurship, whatever, sports, parenting, whatever. Number two, do they care about you as a person? Like, do they actually want what's best for you? And if you have both of those two things in the equation, then you have a recipe for a really powerful mentoring, coaching relationship. And if I would add one more to that, it's, hey, is this someone who can invest more in your life? Like, can they actually go with you on the journey? And so a lot of times you may have someone that's got credibility, but they don't care about you, right? Not that they don't care about you, they just don't know you, they don't care about you. You can have someone that really cares about you, but they don't have credibility, right? They don't know the thing, they don't know the topic. And then you may have someone that's willing to spend some time with you, but they don't really care about you and they don't have credibility. And now you're wondering why you're spending time with me, right? So we don't trust, those situations, maybe manipulation, wherever the case may be. So I always encourage people when you're navigating relationships, and you're really focusing, talking about hustle. We don't want to hustle for the sake of hustling sake, right? A lot of people, I think, have a badge of honor around, well, I'm a hustler, I work hard. And that's great. I think it's better than not. But are we intentionally learning and growing and developing ourselves as part of that? Where I think a lot of people get caught up just on the work piece, right? And so the work piece is super important, but how are we growing? And in my opinion, one of the best ways to level up is to work hard and hustle along with maximizing mentorship, maximizing coaching, maximizing association of people, that ultimately, like I just said, all those kind of elements can come together to maximize your own performance and your well-being at the end of the day as well.
I think that's amazing. And when we talk about that on the podcast, when we talk about keep hustling, one of the things that and I know this is why I was excited to have you. One of the reasons is because it's not just about hustle till the end, till death. Yeah. It's defining and redefining someone's hustle. But I also think something just occurred to me as you were speaking, and it's very interesting. And I think that there's two ways that someone can prove that they're in it to win it with you. One is that they have the experience, they believe in you, you trust them, and they truly care about you. But how do you explain the teammates? And I think the other side is, without those three, are you willing to do it alongside me?
Yep.
If you're willing to, right, the coach who believed in you didn't have to run the 5-minute mile because they were up here, they had achieved it, and they were going to help you get there. But in the end of the day, the teammates who are willing to be in the trenches with you, get dirty, get sweaty, do the training alongside you, you want to perform for them just as much as the coach. So the way that a person, I think, can build that trust in someone else to form those bonds is either by having that experience, which everyone needs in a mentor, but it's also that friend, that partner who you're building with, who's willing to be in the trenches with you. And then you say to yourself, you look to your left and you say, like, well, forget the fact that I may want to quit right now, but I can't quit because of that guy. And by the way, both people could be thinking the same thing at the same time. And therefore, really, both of them would be happy if they would just be sitting on their couch. But because of the other, they're inspired to move forward, which is the amazing thing about working in partnership. I have a lot more to get to. So I want to ask you, recently I've been really getting into the bios, and I just try to pinpoint, there's an awesome line in your bio that I just want to focus on because I think very often gets lost. And that is the building a culture of champions framework. It's designed to help team leaders. Now, this is a very important part. So we are forming team leaders. We are not helping to form or stimulate or inspire individuals who will remain on an island. Yet, the next words after, designed to help team leaders, are as follows: develop the personal growth habits and the communication and relationship building skills that they need to maximize team performance. And I think what I'd like to ask you about is, can you talk about the relationship and the importance in personal growth and focus to then inspire team leadership? Meaning, very often leaders and those who have the opportunity to be leaders forget to focus on themselves and their own development and their own foundations. And I believe what you're saying is that there is something there that's far more important. And that is that if a person focuses on themselves and that best version, then they're able to lead better.
100%. So when you think about a lot of the people that I coach, mentor, develop, their organizations, the clients that I work with, stakeholders, usually they've climbed the ladder based on technical ability, right? So that means they're really good as a doctor. They're really good as a project manager. They're good at a digital marketer. They're good at the expertise of the thing. But then they're required to, not required, but they kind of climb the ladder or grow a company or grow a business. And now they have to lead a team, right? And they're so focused on the details and the execution. And one of the things I found to be essential, kind of now getting at specifically at your question, is how do I equip myself so I'm more capable of developing others? And I think culturally in America, we're very certification driven. We're very academic driven, meaning that if you have a college degree or a piece of paper, and please don't misunderstand, I'm not saying those are things don't have value, but a lot of times we put so much value on formal education that people lose the ownership of their own personal growth. They actually do not value learning the way that we're born and raised to do so. My son's almost 4 years old. He loves to learn, right? And I think kids are naturally that way. And then for some reason, through our system of schooling, education, all the things, we come out being like, man, I don't like to read. Not true. People are on social media all day long reading articles. They like reading things that are relevant. And so, kind of bringing this now full circle, if you can develop not only a mindset, that personal growth, when I say personal growth, let's be clear, we're talking about reading books, listening to podcasts like this, attending events, conferences, seeking mentors, self-reflection. But how do I grow me as an individual in a way that's going to help me personally? But those skills always then translate professionally. How do I do that in a really intentional way? And what ends up happening is, as a team leader, it rubs off on others. So, if you go back to the Messiah soccer program, where I was talking about, the soccer programs, Dave Brandt stood on the shoulders of his prior coach, but where he built a lot of the leadership culture around, going back to the late 90s, was reading books that are on my shelf right now, right? That have been recommended, books like Good to Great. I'm not here to promote books or anything, but I do like, there's authors that I like to, talk about because they've had so much impact. Right. And so when you start to read and learn, and I'm looking back in my 4 years there, almost every meeting that he would do, team meeting, he would be talking about a book, a thought, something from mainstream culture that he was learning and growing. At the time, I just thought he was really smart. Now he is, right? He is really smart, but I didn't realize how much you could close the gap. And this is probably the most important thing of where you are right now and where you want to get. The biggest change is usually your perspective and how you think. And how you think and who you are as a person is determined by what you're putting into your mind on a daily basis. And so what I like to do is equip people on how do I read, listen, learn daily, consistently, and intentionally with the strategy so I can close the gap between who I am and who I need to be. And then once you know how to do that as a leader, as a team leader, you're going to help people in your organizations do the same thing. Because when you understand the power of personal growth the way that I do, you're going to talk about it all the time. And you're going to create that environment and that culture that's continually learning and continually growing. And that's what we all want. We want teams that are winning, growing, learning, changing intentionally.
I think it's an amazing thing that it's the most selfish, but then becomes selfless part of leadership is that, it's like, and it's been brought up on the podcast before, you have to put your mask on before you put on someone else's, right? That's what they say in the airplane, you got to be.
Yeah.
But yet, and nobody says that. And if you think about it, as it relates to life, nobody says that shouldn't be that way because you won't be able to breathe. But yet in personal development, people think it's selfish. Leaders say, why should I be focusing on me? I have a team of 10, 20, 30, 100,000 employees that are depending upon me. Yet the best outcome for them is when that leader is optimizing themselves.
Yes.
And so it's somewhat ironic that if people would focus on those personal growth habits, that's almost I wouldn't call it a step. That's the prerequisite to being a good leader.
100%.
And I assume you're going to say that can be different for everybody, and different people have different things that inspire them or get them moving, or as long as they develop those positive professional growth habits and they become the right habits. But I just think it's something that's lost because people just don't realize that that's really the best foundation.
Yeah, and I love how you put it that way, right? People can look at it as being selfish or not having the time. I found a lot of times people don't see the value in it, and life gets busy, life gets in the way. And so we start to, again, focus on all the doing, right? The activities, the actions that I need to do. And the example I always like to use is, you think about an athlete, what do they need to do to stay fit, for the team, right? They need to work out, they need to eat right, they need to do all the things, right, to grow their physical capacity. right? They need to grow their muscles. They need to get faster. They need to get stronger. And there's elements that overlap into leadership as well from a physical perspective, but talking specifically from personal growth and a leadership lens, you cannot lead what you haven't learned, right? You cannot lead beyond your own self-image and your own capacity. And one of the greatest ways to raise your capacity is to get around thought leaders that make you better.
And I love that. And I love that. I want to pivot to something that you talk about as it relates to the ability to lead and the ability to grow. And that is something that I think that a lot of people lose sight of or fall short on. I'm gonna just very quickly mention the 5 parts of the framework, and then I just want to focus on one, if that's okay.
Yeah, for
the
sure.
growth catalyst, the champion's year, visionary spark, language of victory, and then coaching for gold. I want to focus on the visionary spark because you say that the visionary spark is learning to build buy-in, excitement, and engagement.
Yep.
Where do you think most leaders fall short in that, in getting buy-in?
I could go all day on that one. I love that question, but
I think it's the hardest one. I think that to get others, building yourself up is great if you don't get others to build it, you don't, and then everything else afterwards, victory and everything else can only come once there's buy-in. So that's kind of why I like to focus in the middle there.
Yeah, and I'll just share contextually, if you look at the way that framework's designed, it doesn't have to be this way, but it's really chronological, right? You do the first thing, you do the second thing, you do the third thing, you move on, and it creates a really amazing culture. But when you talk about visionary spark, the gap that I see is the first part of the framework, which is the champion's ear. They don't listen well enough. They don't really lean into their team and to their people to understand what their strengths are, what their challenges are, what they're going through, what is that person's ambition level. So connected to that is they don't have a vision. And when I say vision too, in this context, I'm not talking about an organizational vision, right? I think a lot of teams, organizations have some kind of vision that's out there. But what we fail to do at the core part of your question, what we fail to do is have real conversations with the people that we're ultimately leading and responsible for to help them understand their vision in the team. I'll give you a specific example, going to sports again. Now, I wasn't there for these conversations, but I know these conversations happen. I talk about this quite a bit. There's a player that I played with, really high-level player. He was a backup goalkeeper for 4 full years, and he could have played very high level, started almost anywhere else in the country, but he stayed because of the culture, the environment, the learning, the growth, all that he was a part of. And the short part of the story is he ends up being put in a shootout in playoffs in the championship game, and he ends up stopping 3 penalty kicks. I mean, the story is, if you tell the whole story, it's crazy.
Wow.
But he stops 3 penalty kicks as a backup goalkeeper. There's articles written up about it. I mean, it's crazy. But here's the thing. He had a very clear conversation over time with his coaches that his vision, if he wasn't the starter, was how can you, number one, fight to be a starter, because you never know. But number 2, how can you play a role for the team right now to set the standard for your starting goalkeeper that there's always somebody else that can make the starter better, right? How does iron sharpens iron? And he embraced that role so much that at any given practice, you would not know who the starter was. You would have no clue based on how he was, because his vision was clear. Didn't happen by himself. Someone actually had a conversation with him to help him understand his role and the vision and how he could fill that out, so he had a real purpose. And I think that is.
And what ends up happening is, right, he becomes basically the best goalkeeper, right? Meaning he was like 1 and 1A. It wasn't 1 and 2. And as you said, so he probably still became the best version of himself, even though he wasn't in the starting role, because if you zero in on that, then you still want to perform at the high level and perform to your best capacity. So I think that's amazing. There's a sign behind you for those who are watching. I've just been focused on this. I got to ask. It says, make every day count. You strike me as a very thought out person. I feel like you've thought of this before. So I have to ask you, what is the most important thing that every listener can do to make every day count?
Wow. That is a heavy question. There's a lot, but if I could bring it down to one thing, it would be to take time on your own and think about what matters to you and where you're going right now every day. Meaning, get your why, get your motivation, get the things that matter, get your dreams every single day and revisit them, look at them, think about them, have conversations with whoever's important to you. Those are the things that I would say that would make every day count, is if you truly take time to reflect, not just I got it, just actually take 5 minutes and think about it every day.
And I think, by the way, that will also help, not to just, it's another shameless plug for Keep Hustling, but what we talk about here, which is constantly redefining and then chasing that hustle, right? So the hustle, I talk about this all the time. You know, I'm a father of 5. My wife's hustle has been defined and redefined and forcefully redefined over and over again. And every day seems to have to count differently when there are little kids getting up in the middle of the night and she's taking care of them. So I think you're right. I think that if more people took the time to reflect and then plan, motivate, strategize, that's what makes it count. Aimlessly moving forward and saying, I'm just going to sit every day for 5 minutes and meditate without thinking about having that vision or preparing. It's great. It might be nice, but I think you're right. The way to make it all count is to have that vision and prepare yourself every day. So I love that.
Yeah, I mean, I see it all the time. People come to me and they've gotten to a point where they've worked really hard at the thing they're good at, whether it's, again, dentist, doctor, whatever, right? CEO, entrepreneur. They've worked really hard at the thing, but they haven't really really evaluated their progression. They haven't really evaluated their mental state. And now they're gassed, they're tired, they're overwhelmed. And, this is where that self-reflection piece and being intentional with what you're learning every day, goes a long way.
I love that. As you know, we have a closed tradition on this podcast where we ask, I can't believe it's already, we're already at the end. Holy moly, that was a tongue twister. As you know, we have a closing tradition. We ask all of our guests to leave us with their favorite motivational or inspirational quote. With that, Jevon, I'm going to say thank you again for being here. Thank you for making the time. Thank you for inspiring me. Thank you for inspiring me to check out the culture of champions, because I want to be a champion. Check out everything else that you're doing. And I will just say again, thank you. And the floor is yours.
So my son's middle name is actually Wakulota. It's a Southeastern African language, Tumbuka. My father is from there. And so all of us, my siblings, all have Tumbukan names. And Wakulota means dreamer. And so setting dreams has always been a huge part of us, reevaluating, thinking about the future. And so one of the quotes that always kind of stands out to me is set a dream so big that it scares you. And you have to grow into the person that you need to become in order to accomplish it, right? That's kind of the idea behind that. And so there's always got to be a gap between, again, where we are, where we want to go, and who do we need to become to actually accomplish that. So that's what that quote, means to me. It's hopefully helpful for your audience.
I love that. And it also means that it never stops.
It never stops.
Because the dreams of the person, right? What is it that they say? And I never do this at the end of the quote, but I'm just loving this. Like you are what you envisioned 5 years ago or something like that, So therefore a person should always think about that. And if you dream, you constantly dream, then your dreams evolve and then your hustle evolves too. So
that's it.
I love that. Everyone check out Jevon. This has been another episode of Keep Hustling. Remember, do well by doing good. And of course, and always, keep hustling. All right, hustlers, that brings us to the end of another fantastic episode. Thank you for listening. The listeners are the most important part of this show. If you like what you heard, please leave us a review wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Your feedback means the world to us and helps us reach more listeners. Plus, be sure to subscribe to our podcast so you never miss an episode. We have some amazing guests and topics lined up for you, and we don't want you to miss out. And finally, if you have any suggestions, comments, or even just want to say hello, please feel free to reach out to us on all social media platforms. We are Keep Hustling Pod on Instagram, X, Facebook, and LinkedIn. We would love to hear from you to continue the conversation. Thanks again for tuning in and supporting our podcast. We truly appreciate each and every one of you. Until next time, stay curious, stay hungry, and keep hustling.